come in. The famous cooking classroom of Sandra, that is a very important part of the farm. Today we have no cooking, but we have cheeses now. As I was already speaking before, we have here selected a group of 4 cheeses. What means that now? For us at the moment, these cheeses are the most interesting cheeses. Of course, the new Pecorino we produce now for 2 weeks is also interesting, but will be much more interesting in spring when the sheep will find a beautiful green pasture with clover and nice grass. At the moment they eat basically hay because it's too awful for them also to go outside. So that's why we prepared for you this so-called 4 old guys. That's a smart term of our sale department. Old guys means this old, the big wheel that is 2 years old, Pecorino. Another old one I showed you already is the Pecorino a year old. Yeah, maybe you come a bit closer. And then this goat cheese of the last year. And here is the one that I couldn't show you because it was, I don't know where. That's the so-called Fossino. We call this Fossino. That's an invention of us. Fossa means is a hole in the ground, and this cheese stayed 3 months underground, you can say. But that later, we will speak later about this. The tasting of a cheese. I move a bit away so you can see here the board. This is a nice decoration. The tasting of a cheese selection should be always starting with the, let's say, the mildest cheese and finishing with the strongest cheese. That's a bit as when you go to a wine tasting, you never start with the 10-year-old red wine and then you finish with a white wine, you go always with the opposite. I always make this comparing with wine tasting because a lot of people is very attracted to study wine, and most people just buy a cheese, and that's a bit of a mistake because cheese has the same story as a wine. So that's why we start today in the tasting with the Pecorino Stagionato. Here you see the label. That here let's say cheese. Sorry, excuse me. The cheese should be, when you see here this part, so should always cut it from the middle to the edge. So you should never cut the cheese like that. Because it's important, here you see a piece of this cheese, it's important that during the tasting we have always the center close to the rind together. So a perfect piece to taste. No? Just to give you a few, I'm not really a master of cheese tasting, but I try to learn always. The first, let's say, value is the visual part. So you see it's a cheese. The color, you see this is much more yellow. It's always connected with the food. A yellow S with a lot of carotene. Carotene is kind of a part of the cheese, of the grass. Or then you see, for example, the holes you can note. No, holes can be a mistake, but holes can be also a part of the cheese. Famous is the Swiss cheese with the big holes, no? And that's why now the first part is always visual, no? Then you taste, or you make a bit of test pressing the cheese. So is it soft, hard? Of course, these are all hard cheeses. Consequence, the influence of this is then it's not so important. And then the part you smell the cheese. Never forget the cheese cannot stink. Can smell strong or less. Of course, these are all a bit smelly cheeses, but this one, for example, is not very strong. That's why we start with this. And then of course we come to the taste the cheese. And this is, for example, now a Pecorino Stagionato. So a year is of course a long time for a cheese. Considering that milk you can maybe keep 3-4 days, but the cheese is you can take longer, but it's a long time. But this is still a cheese that is very, very mild. It's first produced, that's spring of last year. And that means that in this cheese and less milk based on grass. You understand this? Now the influence of the food of the animal is really important. So this is, we could also call a bit of late winter cheese. In fact, it's the batch 81, that is probably late February. Okay, so remember, you start with the kind of the mildest cheese. Next step, we come here to these beautiful big wheels. So a lot of people always considering, oh, they look a bit as a Parmesan, but that's obviously the right consideration, but the Parmesan is definitely has nothing to do with this, because Parmesan is, you have to do the same. So alone would be too much. But again, we have here the slice, and then we make again these sticks. Here these holes, for example, this is typical holes. That is not a mistake. Action. Raw milk cheeses have always more holes. More life means. Then we have here a beautiful red round hole. You see here on the point of the knife. This is then a bit a kind of an example, as you know, from the famous Swiss cheese with the big holes. So this is a clear result of a bacteria in the cheese that basically develops these holes now. So this kind of holes are connected with bacteria operation. And here again you have, we make this stick, that's obviously the big stick. Of course you should have a very good bread to this, and maybe also a nice red wine for this weather. And again we have here the texture is of course quite hard. We have the color is definitely, I showed you already, more yellow. And again, already the flavor, I cannot show you the flavor because not yet the smartphone is produced to bring you also flavors, but the flavor is already much stronger. And of course, also eating, you have really flavors that the first cheese cannot bring because it's not enough time to age. No? It doesn't mean that this cheese a year older will be the same, because the influence of the size of the wheel is an important influence. So a big wheel is aging different to a small wheel. And that's why I know certain cheeses are always very big and other cheeses are always very small. You can consider that fresh cheeses are always smaller cheeses. What means a fresh cheese? Is a cheese produced to be eaten more or less young, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 2 months, but definitely not a year or 2 years old. Okay, we go to the third one. Here you see the label. So Caprini means goat cheese, so it's a part of our selection, and Stagionato again aged. This is a batch of last spring, famous 2020. Goat cheeses are aging completely different because goat milk is completely different. So milk is never the same. It looks always the same. It looks always liquid and white, but a goat milk is different to a sheep milk. Then the important is the breed of the animal. So a brown goat, now a bit simple said, a brown goat makes a different milk than a white goat. Obviously there's a breed behind. And as I told you also, the food, the ambient where they live has an influence, consequence. What means now a goat cheese? It's very unusual to have aged goat cheese. Goat is considered better as a young cheese. That has a bit, I think it's more a problem that most people think that goat cheese is a bit smelly. Consequence, an old goat cheese can be very smelly, but if you, I cannot show you really the tasting. I can show you the tasting, but not feel the tasting. This cheese is still very mild, but of course has a certain, you see here also these holes, these are completely regular holes. The color is very similar to the first one. You see it more or less the same. It's connected always, that's a very spring, late winter cheese. And in the nose and then on the tongue it starts to be a bit more spicy, we can call it. That's a very difficult challenge to find the right words for. Some guests here call a cheese funky. That definitely is not a funky cheese. I like this term funky. Some cheese, it's a cheese that has definitely a goat flavor, but really don't be afraid, a stinky goat flavor. I use now this term because a lot of people consider goat cheese more stinky, no? Of course, our cheeses are all available on our shop, on our website. So that's why basically what I explain you here, with a bit luck, you can also taste in a few days if you order soon. And now we come to this very special cheese. That's a specialty that here you see also the label. You see this looks a bit ugly, no? So this was once a round form. But putting this cheese in these holes in the ground, so you can imagine that's a kind of a hole. It's not here on the farm, we bring this in holes, so with bricks, and then they put the cheese, 1,000 cheese together, with straw, and then they close the hole. And the hole will be closed for 3 months, more or less. That was traditionally a system to maintain the cheese humid during the dry summer. So all these farms, they don't have a real cave. Consequence, arriving in June, all the production of cheese of the spring started to suffer, to sweat, and they developed this idea, oh, let's put it underground and we maintain the humidity. What happens now in this hole? In this hole is a very, very strong fermentation of the cheese. So that's why this kind of aging of a cheese can be also a technical term, is a kind of a fermented aging. Fermenting means definitely a lot of flavor. So this is only for cheese lovers. But it's not stinky. Don't forget this term, that this is not really the right one for cheese. You see the texture is definitely, also the color is a bit ugly. But this kind of aging has really an additional, gives the cheese an additional flavor. As we live in a very, very complicated moment, so we have a lot of bureaucracy. So at the end, you cannot find many of these holes or this fossa in Italy. So this went close to San Marino, so the east coast of Italy. There is a famous place. We discovered now here close in Montepulciano there is another place that has a fossa like that, so maybe soon we will be a bit more sustainable in this and we don't have to drive the whole Italy. The tasting of this cheese is of course, you see it's very dry, because in this hole happens really amazing things. And the flavor is really good. This is, for example, perfect with a beautiful honey. Because the honey, the sweet honey, gives a bit of a balance to the flavor, no? Great. Very, very special. So remember, Fossino. I'm sure that also in America there are places they developed aging of the cheese like that, but I don't know where it is because I'm here in Tuscany. Okay, now to conclude now this tasting, I would like just to show you that we have, to give you the opportunity to, of course for you it's now difficult to choose what could be the best. So that's why we have a kind of that's a miracle box, no, a tasting box, where you can find these 4 cheeses. You have of each cheese, you have an example. Just then maybe you have to buy a good bread or you make a good bread. And of course for the moment I think would be much better a good red wine. And I think the evening is successful after, no? So that's our selection box. If you would like to taste all these 4 cheeses without breaking your head to select the best one. Okay, this is the box. And now we come to the last part. After that we hope that Alberto will start to milk. Recently we got this finally this book that is a book that is written by let's say a bit simple 2 girlfriends of 2 of my 5 sons. So that's a kind of a new generation operation and makes me more than happy that happens. It's a book all in English, by the way. It's a book about the farm, so you see Podere CASALE, and you see family food and farming. So it's not only the book about the farm, but also a book about cooking, because at the end, what is a farm? Produce food, and food has to be prepared. And I show you just here the part about cheese. So il formaggio would be the cheese. That's a very ugly photo of me. I milked ugly because it's a strange position. I milked, you see here the bucket, I milked for 20 years the sheep with my hands. If you are in time, we will see now there is a sophisticated milking machine, because modern times milking by hand is for the museum and not anymore for real work. And you see here is a bit of a description about the cheese making. You see a bit operation. And then, very special, we have here an idea what you can do with our cheese. Huh? So please, here is another beautiful, a good photo, not of a beautiful man, but a good photo. So you see, I'm basically a shepherd. No, that's my girlfriend here. Goats are like that, no? And yeah, this book is really, I recommend you. Oh, that's another ugly photo of me. But that's because the radish was really strong. It was really hot. I really recommend you the book to give you a bit, especially in these difficult times, a bit an idea what happens in Tuscany on the farm, because unfortunately at the moment nobody can come here. I hope soon we'll change this disaster, but yeah, we never know. And you see then there is a part about grains. Then of course there is an amazing part about, this is one of the girls, so the Claudia, she is the cook, so she developed and prepared all this. The meat, now when you have animals, then you have, it's always nice to show photos. Another photo of Claudia, that's our chef. Very proud for his porchetta. Porchetta is a small, just another photo of me as a shepherd. For this. Yeah, just, this is also available on our shop. Huh? Please. Yeah, now I don't know if I look quick if Alberto is already milking.